This week, a hard-working, good-hearted employee at the USDA was dragged into the limelight over alleged racist comments. She was told to submit her resignation over her BlackBerry and was removed from her position. Problem? Claims weren't true. Now, the evidence was made up of a clip from the NAACP meeting about 2 years ago. At that meeting, Shirley Sherrod, a black woman whose parents were killed for the color of their skin, told of a farmer who came in for help and treated her like an inferior. And she admits that she did not want to give this man all the help she could because he was white. That's the part that ended up in the video released on Tuesday. That part was to be ostensibly be played on the Glenn Beck show. And the word of that got out to the upper levels, the USDA. They called and demanded Ms. Sherrod's resignation. The NAACP got wind of it, and they also demanded action. Problem is, that was just a small part of the video. What was on the rest of the video turned the story on its head. What is seen by looking at the entire video is that the statement is not a proud exclamation of revenge, but of a turning point, where Ms. Sherrod realized that she was being guilty of the same racism she had experienced. And she was perpetuating the problem. And that it changed her way of looking at things. What's also not seen in the video is that she went back and did everything she could for that family. The farmer and his wife have since come forward and backed Ms. Sherrod, saying their success, their livelihood, was due to the help they received from Ms. Sherrod. Indeed, they're friends to this day. So how did this happen? Well, primarily, this was the result of a set of knee-jerk reactions from the USDA, the NAACP, perhaps the White House. Now, they've all delivered mea culpas. The damage is done. They all jumped when a conservative blogger posted the selectively edited video. And in fear that there might be a controversy, they jumped far too quickly. But this is a symptom of a different problem. As I mentioned last week when talking about Republican strategy for the midterms, Democrats need to get tough if they want a chance in this election season. Part of that toughness is not reacting to everything as if it's an emergency, especially those of a blogger. Look, I understand the desire to increase transparency, to seem responsive, but this instant reaction to everything is self-defeating. And the right have figured out how to get it to happen on cue and make the most of it. And the folks on the left, they help it along. The traditional circular firing squad of the left came out in full force, first screaming for the resignation, and then turned around and screamed at those who asked for it. And all the while, folks on the right just sat back, fed them the ammunition. I understand the frustration. After years of conservative policies tearing down liberties, shuttling money to big business and the wealthy, driving us into wars, people on the left wanted a change. But it seems they naively believed it would happen immediately. And when it didn't, the left forgot the achievements that have been delivered and only focused on what hasn't happened. And so the left's circular firing squad takes aim and shoots themselves in the foot. Everywhere else, they're damaging the gains that have been made, pushing all those gains to the rear, while these lousy, bogus attacks come to the forefront. For example, just in the last week, Wall Street reform was passed and signed into law. With it, some of the most powerful consumer protections in history. Protections designed to avoid a future meltdown like the ones that we're currently working our way out of. What kind of protections? Well, first, an end to too big to fail. And to do this, measures have been put in place to create a fund, a backup, paid for by the finance industry itself so that companies that are on the brink of failure can be unwound without putting taxpayers' dollars into play to keep them afloat. Had such a system been in place before the current mess, there would have been no bank bailout, no taxpayer money loaned to private institutions, and there would have been no threats from the industry that the failure of one company would bring the world economy crashing down. They simply would have used their fund to put the failing company to rest. On top of this, more stringent requirements have been implemented in terms of bank capitalization. This means that banks will have to have a larger share of the money they loan. The leveraging that banks allowed during the years leading up to the crisis resulted in far more money being loaned than the banks had. When those loans went unpaid, it quickly snowballed. By requiring lending institutions to have more of that money actually on hand, the exposure to damage from bad loans is reduced, creating more stability in the financial industry. Shareholders will also be giving a say in CEO compensation. Now, this means that consumers who hold stocks will have more direct connection and influence on how much CEOs are paid. If you think that's not a big deal, here's a little tidbit for you. In 1950, the average executive's paycheck was about 30 times the size of the average employee's paycheck. Today, that ratio is between 300 and 500 to 1. So either those execs have become 10 to 15 times more valuable than they were in 1950, or something has gone way out of whack. Even amid the financial crisis, Wall Street bonuses for 2009 were up 17% from 2008. Shareholders, many of whose monthly income relies on the health of the stocks they own, should have a say in the pay structure of the people running their company. There are a number of other protections included as well, including protections in credit cards and lending, as well as credit card rate hikes. Also passed this week were extensions of unemployment insurance benefits, giving relief to millions who are still struggling to get back to work. While Republicans cry about tax cuts being allowed to expire, the fact is the money spent on unemployment benefits has more of a positive effect on the economy than putting more money in the hands of the wealthy. The unemployed immediately put that money back into the economy, paying their bills and keeping other folks employed in the process. The wealthy, on the other hand, are sitting on their money waiting for a better time to spend. Also passed this week with little fanfare was the Improper Payments Elimination and Recovery Act. This was passed unanimously by both the House and the Senate. The idea? Remove the excess spending and fraudulent payments from the system. One example given is that of a $3 million expenditure every year, annually, every year, for a radio navigation system for the Navy when we have GPS. 20 years ago, this cost might have been justified. Eliminating these extra expenditures alone represents $20 billion, with a B, in cost cutting, just by finding unnecessary redundancies. The second focus of the bill is to reduce improper payments. Now, these are payments made to the wrong person or entities that should not receive them. For example, payments made to contractors that are no longer allowed to work for the government, or payments to individuals who are trying to defraud the government, including payments to dead people. The estimated savings from this area alone is about $110 billion, again with a B. That's a total of $130 billion in savings from this one program. In all, 3 separate important pieces of legislation were signed last week. How many did you know about? Now, I can guarantee the right doesn't want you to know about any of them. Heck, they have vowed to repeal Wall Street reform. Remember that when they start spouting their campaign talk. They want to repeal the protections that were signed into law this week. The right will try to get you to forget about the gains made this week and in the past few months. Meanwhile, the left gets so up in arms about the stumble made over the Sherrod map that they completely miss the real news. That there was a whole lot of good done this week. And here's what I say to them. Knock it off. Who needs Republicans when the left is simply going to bash themselves into the ground? A whole lot of good was done this week. I just thought you should know. We'll be right back.